Hey everybody, it's Curse, and today I'm going to bless you with an extremely OP Lich build. I discovered it about 2 weeks ago, and we've had 2 rounds of patches, and ESG haven't fixed it yet, so I figure, why not? Let's share it with everybody, and people can have some fun with it over the weekend, and there's a good chance it's going to get bug fixed next week. So don't get too attached to it, but, you know, give it a try if you feel like it. And why do I say it's so OP? Well, it's got ridiculous single target damage, as you can see in this early part of the video. It's got great clear, it's got insane mobility, and it even has decent survivability. This build has everything. The problem is it is likely abusing a bugged interaction in the Bone Curse skill tree. Anyways, irashaimase! Alright, let's go over the skills for the build. Starting with what makes it so incredibly overpowered. It's Bone Curse, and the bugged interaction that I was talking about is Illusion of Pain, which makes it so that it always crits, dealing 2.5 times the damage, but it adds a bunch of negative effects, side effects to it, where Bone Curse has a maximum hits of 1, and it adds a cooldown of 6 seconds. However, if you pick up the Cursed Limbs node, every time you hit an enemy with anything, really, whether it's a spell or a melee hit, it reapplies Bone Curse with Illusion of Pain. And as you can imagine, since we're running Hungering Souls, with the Curse of Perseverance staff, which makes it so that all 15 souls can hit the same enemy, we're applying 15 Illusion of Pain Bone Curses, and it's just insane amounts of damage. So that's where the bug is coming from, and I suspect that's going to get fixed. However, I am speccing this build and preparing some of my itemization in a way where hopefully this is viable even after the fix as well. We'll see. I'll test it out and I'll tell you. We want to get Cursed Limbs at least 4 or 5 points, so that it's basically almost 100% uptime between your transplant casting Bone Curse, as well as you can cast Bone Curse itself. If you bring it up to 5 points, transplant is sufficient because you can bring it down to like 4-second cooldown, 4.5 second cooldown easily. And so then you can actually even take Bone Curse out of your skill bar. You no longer need it. As long as you have it specced up here, you're fine. So then that opens up a bunch of different options. Otherwise, you want to get your Mark for Death. Make sure to take 1 point in Oppressive Gaze for 40% extra damage. It doesn't matter that it's single target because we're applying all of it with our Hungering Souls anyways. So this isn't, the downside doesn't impact us. And you want to convert it to Necrotic because that aligns it with the Necrotic Hungering Souls, and we get a bunch of plus skills from our weapon and our relic. And that's about it for Bone Curse. Next, let's take a look at Hungering Souls. And Hungering Souls is not going to be our main DPS source here. It's a supplementary damage source. And basically, we want to spec it into creating as many projectiles as possible. Here's +4. Here you can have a 40% chance for +6 projectiles. Because remember, every projectile triggers Bone Curse. And then we want to reduce the mana cost through these 2 nodes. What I want to mention is Life Hunt. I recently specced into this, and it's amazing. You know, the 20% cast speed feels great. Speed and range is what's more important though. Speccing into this allows you to kind of match the pace with your Hungering Souls. So if you're running forward, they're coming with you if you precast them previously, and they're going to be killing enemies around you. Otherwise, you're going to be running ahead of them, and it doesn't feel as good. And also, it makes them reach farther, so that you know, if you're running monoliths, this skill is phenomenal. And we can get away with reducing the damage of our Hungering Souls. I took some points from here and here and here to bring it up to 4 points in this Life Hunt. But otherwise, you want souls that are about 2 mana cost. You can probably survive with 3 mana cost as well. But 2 mana cost makes it so you can spam them indefinitely. Afterwards, get some damage between these 3 nodes. Unholy Trinity makes an appearance in this build as well. Fortunately, we don't need to rely on it as much. Next, we look at transplant. Reduce the cooldown as much as possible. You can see I'm running 4.3 seconds. If you can bring that down under 4 seconds with maybe something from your boots or from your belt, that can make a big difference. Just because you can just have 4 points in cursed limbs and not worry about things. And then get your bone armor. Make sure to get haste and frenzy. This node right here is great. Get ethereal body because it gives you +2 skill points from the itemization that we have. And then make sure to have bone curse on arrival. This is what makes the build quite a bit stronger. And also, I find 1 point in Dance of Blood useful just because it applies bone curse, right? Like 1 cast on a single target enemy. It's something. It's not insane or anything, but just a little bit more damage on single target enemies. For Reaper form, we want to get the maximum cast speed possible. So we definitely want Rapid Destruction. And then we want to run Transplant and Reap simultaneously. So make sure to max these two. 1 point in Haunting is enough because we're hitting something like 100 times per second. It's ridiculous. So you're definitely going to be applying so many Marked for Death with just 1 point. And honestly, you already have Marked for Death from Bone Curse as well. So it's just a little bit of extra Marked for Death for that. This build lacks in flat spell damage because the weapon we're using has very low spell damage. So 3 points in here is quite nice. And then 5 points in crit multi because there's a guaranteed critical strike with Illusion of Pain. And then Death Seal is pretty standard. Get your Deadlock. Make sure to max out Hungering Souls. Get some haste on release, max duration, and then pump the rest into your pulses. Nothing special here. So yeah, that's it for the skills. Now let's look at the itemization. The core item for this build is Curse of Perseverance. You can make the build work without all of the other items, but you must have Curse of Perseverance for the build to work. And that is because it makes it so that your Hungering Souls projectiles are fired in sequence and can all hit the same target but deal 63% less damage. And we don't care about dealing less damage with our souls because most of our damage is coming from Bone Curse anyways. So that's what makes this build so strong. Ideally, you want cast speed in it. You can see I have tier 7 cast speed. And then you don't really want ignite and damage over time. That was something that I had for a different build. Ideally, what you'd want here is increased necrotic damage. And honestly, if you're running on Ashes of Mortality, ignite is not that bad for suffixes. But damage over time is not something you want. That's for sure. So yeah, that is the one core item for the build. Next, I'll go over a bunch of semi-core items. I do want to highlight that the Curse of Perseverance staff only has 32 spell damage, and that is extremely low. What that means is that we want to supplement our spell damage as much as possible through our passives and our other items in order to compensate for that. And that's something you can utilize in other builds that you make as well. If you have an extremely low attribute of some sort because of a certain item or skill choice, try to supplement it as much as possible from other sources. So how do we supplement the spell damage in this case? One source of extra spell damage is Immolator's Oblation. It gives us 63% chance to ignite ourselves when we use a fire or necrotic skill, and we're doing that quite a bit every second, so 3-4 times per second. And then it gives us +6 spell damage for fire and necrotic skills per stack of ignite on you. You can see that we get, on average, if we're just spamming 10 to 11 stacks of ignite. That's 60 spell damage. And that's already like doubling the spell damage we're getting from our staff. It also gives you frenzy per stack of ignite on our hero. So it's just the perfect belt for the build. Another semi-core item is Twisted Heart of Ukairos. And that is because it takes care of a lot of our survivability issues. It converts our health to ward. It gives us necrotic spell skill levels. Gives us cast speed. Even gives us some armor, 20% health. It's just a great item overall. Another item that I would say is semi-core, and it seems a little bit counterintuitive, is this Invoker Static Touch. And the reason I like to run it is that 13 spell damage, even though it's lightning spell damage, it's still really strong. You can see like we're running 30 spell damage. 13 is a huge percentage increase, even if you take into account some of the passive choices that we have that give us plus 20 spell damage. This is quite strong. This is like, you know, if we don't run the belt, this is say 20% increase in damage just from that plus 13 spell lightning damage. Additionally, it has 10% chance to gain 75 ward when you hit a shocked enemy. And our enemies are always going to be shocked because of the 63% chance to shock on spell hit. And so what does this mean? 10% of 75 is 7.5. So that's the expected value of a single hit to generate a ward. Now we're running 15 Hungering Souls, roughly speaking, per cast. And when we have Bone Curse activated, each one of those is going to trigger a Bone Curse instance. And so that's going to be like 30 hits per cast times, you know, 3-4 casts per second. We're doing like 100 hits per second, over 100 hits. So that should be times 7.5 ward. That's around 750 ward per second, thanks to this ring. So you can see a bunch of big bursts of ward being increased here. And some of that is coming from Invoker Static Touch. Another solid semi-core item is Ashes of Mortality. It gives you cast speed, ward retention, necrotic damage, and some ward based on the ignite stacks that are on you. It's just a solid all-around ring. Ideally, you will have 1 or 2 LP with some good bonuses in there as well. But yeah, if you have this ring, you can run it. If you don't have it, you can skip it as well. These 2 rings are not extremely necessary, but I think they add a decent amount to the build itself. And then other than those core and semi-core items, the rest is fairly straightforward. You want to max out your resistances. You want to max out your crit avoid. I'm missing 1%, but it's easy to get because I still have a few more percentages to get from our blessings. And then get some armor if possible. Get a source of frailty on hit. Critical strike chance is not really necessary with this build just because, you know, we're guaranteed to crit with Bone Curse. So you can ignore those and get something else instead. Armor Shred is really good because all of those hits are going to be applying it. And we are dealing, you know, direct damage, not damage over time. So Armor Shred can be quite nice for that. And then I have some Hungering Souls in my helmet. A bunch of intelligence just to get extra ward retention and damage across our build. Some health. Necrotic damage while transformed is not bad. Cast speed in gloves is great. Again, intelligence, hybrid health. And yeah, it's just straightforward stuff from the rest of the items. Now let's check out the idols. The core idols that I would say is these 2, where you get 25% chance for Hungering Souls to fire 6 additional projectiles. Make sure to get 2 of those. And together with this skill node right here, that brings it up to 90% chance for 6 additional projectiles. And then some health and ward retention. And then whatever you need to just max out your res is what I'm using right here. In terms of blessings, for this blessing, I would definitely recommend Crit Multiplier. Chance to ignite on hit is not very useful for this build. I just haven't had a chance to switch it. And honestly, imagine how much even more OP the build is going to be if I get 40% Crit Multi. Even without optimizing, this build is killing Julra in like 4.5 seconds. It's just nuts. And then I'm using the rest of the blessings for resistances. Lightning resist here, physical res here, crit avoid here, armor here, and that's it. Just defensive blessings from these 4. You can't really gain too much from the offensive side. The only one maybe you can consider is necrotic resistance shred, but I don't think it's necessary. Now let's go over the passives. I get a lot of intelligence and resistances from passives as much as possible. Ward retention is good. Some vitality here and there. I do want to highlight necrotic energy. Generally, this node is not great. Only 2 spell damage per point. But because in this case we're lacking spell damage, as I highlighted earlier during the itemization section, this node is actually phenomenal. Make sure to max it out. Necrotic penetration, 8 points in here. And then the rest is fairly straightforward. I like to get a lot of int. It gives us damage and it gives us ward retention. And we're running quite a bit of ward. And whenever Death Seal is off cooldown, you actually get fairly good survivability. But yeah, that's the passive skill tree. Now let me show you how the skill rotation works more or less. You activate your Reaper form, cast Transplant, and then just spam. You can cast Bone Curse right before Transplant is off cooldown, just to make sure you get full coverage of that 4.5 seconds or whatever it is. And then Transplant again when it's off cooldown. You can see the numbers are crazy. And keep in mind, we're hitting so many times per second. If you're running Monoliths, I like to stay out of Death Seal just because it's so squishy in Death Seal. Death Seal is kind of like a boss killing ability that I'm using right now. But yeah, for Monolith farming, I recommend not even going Death Seal. You get crazy amounts of ward, as you can see on the bottom left. From all the hits that you're triggering, you know, the ring, both rings really, Heart of Ukairos, the passive that gives us ward per cast. You can see ward gets generated very generously. Alright, so what is the verdict for this build? I've added it to my build tier list. Here at the top, Bugged Bone Curse, Curse of Perseverance Souls, 5 seconds for tier 4 Julra. That is obviously tier S+. In terms of monoliths, I've gotten it from 370 corruption to 600 and something over the course of like 6 hours or so. And it takes time, so I can do 600 corruption fairly easily. So I guarantee you this can go up to like probably 1,000 corruption is doable if you start playing a little bit more carefully. The mobility is S+, you're blinking around, you're blowing everything up. It is definitely S+ tier for monoliths as well. Survivability is S. You can see that I can generate quite a bit of ward with it. Multiplayer utility is solid. You have like 500 armor shred. And also, it's kind of nice when you're killing everything. I think your multiplayer allies will enjoy that. And the cost to itemize. This is the only somewhat weak side of this build. Is you need Curse of Perseverance. You don't really need anything else, but the Curse of Perseverance is a must-have. So I put it at 8+. Anyways, final tier, S+. We're going to reserve S+ for bugged and like totally OP builds that are getting guaranteed nerfed. So yeah, this is our first S+ build, and it's gonna get nerfed soon. So enjoy it while you can, and I will try to make it viable even after the nerfs, but we'll see. Let's hope EHG don't just completely run it into the ground and leave it so that you can still play with it. With solid enough itemization, I hope to expect something like 20-30 seconds Julra. I think that's reasonable for, you know, very late end game, well optimized, well itemized build. But yeah, this build is mega OP. So now I'll leave you with some Corruption 605 Monolith examples. You can see I'm just running around spamming souls. It's just super easy, especially if you don't have any damage modifiers on the enemies. You run the risk of getting one shot when they have a bunch of damage modifiers, so you have to play more careful in that case. But you can also use Death Seal if the corruption level is super low. You just pop Death Seal and run straight through the entire monolith. Everything is gonna die. And so there you have it. That's the build guide for one of the most OP builds in the entire game right now, if not the most. If you do end up running it, be ready for the nerf. It's coming, especially after I make this video. It's pretty much a guarantee. On some other notes, as of right now, I have 1,997 subscribers on YouTube, so we're almost at that 2,000 mark. We're gonna hit it today. So I wanted to just say thank you one more time to everybody. We're hitting milestone after milestone. It's a lot of fun. And I'm honestly just in awe of the incredibly generous reception everybody's given me. I've started streaming as well, so check that out if you're curious. I did actually optimize this build and run into it while streaming. So if you're curious what kind of builds we're gonna run into and see if we can make the next OP build that will get nerfed. Hop on the stream and have some fun with it. You can also ask me questions. I'm always happy to answer anything related to my builds. When it comes to chat, the more the merrier holds true. So come on by. Special thanks to Perry the Pig. He came by with the first Twitch raid that I've experienced, so that was pretty fun. I've seen it on other streams before, but I hadn't experienced it myself, so thank you, Perry. Anyways, I hope you have a chance to try this build out, and don't forget to take it easy, and gochiso sama deshita.